Welcome back to the Evolving Warfighter. My name is Dr. Franklin Annis, and today we're going to be talking about improving unit-level training and education programs through the use of Andragogy, or adult education theory. Now, improving the quality of training and education in the military is a topic that I'm very passionate about. And today we're here to discuss how we can change the way we teach and educate our service members to increase their desire to learn, to grow, and to allow them to maximize the learning that they can achieve within any set time inside the classroom. We want to avoid the negative implications of using bad teaching techniques that may take away their motivation to learn and may really waste their time just covering materials that either don't relate to their job, don't relate to the current process of how we do things, or don't encourage growth because they've taken this course over and over and over repetitively through the years. Now, most of us, when we go to teach or design a training program for our soldiers, we have a tendency to default to whatever teaching methods that we have most encountered. For most of us, this might be a theory called pedagogy, or the way you train children. In this model, the content of the course is entirely driven by the curriculum. It's determined well in advance what would be taught, how it would be taught. The teacher in the classroom is perceived to be the ultimate authority of the material at hand. Essentially, the teacher will present this information to the class, and it's the student's obligation to learn and be able to regurgitate this information back to the instructor. In this model, it assumes that the students themselves don't have a lot of life experience, and they don't have a lot of value in terms of experience that they can use to teach each other or to further advance the subject. Now, as you can imagine, this is not an optimal model for the military. Not a lot of us love sitting through death by PowerPoint, where an instructor just drones on about information that doesn't necessarily relate to our lives, how we do the tasks, and how we can apply this knowledge into the future. So I want to talk to you about a theory called Andragogy. By the end of this presentation, I hope to present you a description of what adult education is, how it differs from pedagogy or the education model that we're most familiar with. I want to tell you about the 5 assumptions and the 4 principles of this education theory, and more specifically, I want to talk about how you can start using this more advanced education theory inside your unit level training. Now, when we talk about Andragogy, we must begin by talking about a scholar named Malcom Knowles. For his theories of adult education, he used the terms Andragogy. Andra meaning man or person, and agogy meaning to lead in Greek. But it also has an interesting military history connection, as this is the name of the Spartan school used to train soldiers as early as the 8th century BC. Malcom Knowles developed 5 assumptions about the adult learner. The first, and probably the most important, is that adults have a concept of self. Unlike children that need to be told what to do, adults eventually learn what's needed in society and what is required to fulfill their social roles. So adults will actively seek out information and act independently of a leader. This is obviously a behavior that we want to encourage among our service members. Unlike children, adults have vast amounts of experience. By connecting their current learning to their previous experiences with their successes and failures, or their constructs of how they view the world, they can more quickly learn the material at hand. Therefore, it's important to engage and connect with the current material that you're trying to teach back to the experience of the adult learner or students inside your classroom. Adults have a readiness to learn that's connected to their social roles. They want to be able to improve on how they function inside society, how they perform on their job, how they perform as an individual. And adult learners are problem-centric learners. They orient on problems. So when they attend courses, education, training, they're looking to solve actual real-world problems. If the material that you're presenting is so vague that it can't be applied to the real world, adult learners are going to have difficulty finding the motivation to study or to stay with the material at hand. They're truly looking 4 ways to improve their own performance. And it's our job as instructors to design course materials that will give them the information so they can go out and improve on common tasks that they perform. It's also recognized that the motivation to learn shifts from childhood to adulthood. Children are usually motivated highly by external rewards, whether it's high grades, recognition, prizes, etc. However, adult learners are highly driven by intrinsic motivation, or internal motivation to them. They want to improve because they want to improve upon themselves and how they function in society, and not necessarily from external rewards. There are 4 principles to andragogy. The first principle is, since the adult has a function or role in their own education, they should have the opportunity to make choices inside the educational program. They should be involved in the planning of the course itself. This might be as simple as deciding what method they show mastery at the end of the course. Would they give a presentation or would they take a test? Since adult learners have a wealth of experience, and by connecting to this experience we can improve the quality of our education, we should seek to have an experiential model of teaching. In other words, while the students are attending the class, they should be engaging with some type of problem or some type of activity to actively demonstrate the material they're learning. Whatever materials we're teaching, they should have a direct relevance to the individual and have an immediate impact on their ability to function inside the world. Now, this might be an important principle to remember when we talk about military education. A lot of times we teach classes at inappropriate levels. Either we provide materials that are way above the duty position and rank of an individual, or we repetitively give the same course to the individual without providing any type of new information that would improve their performance. This can definitely dishearten and unmotivate our service members. So commanders, I challenge you out there to take a look at the courses and the unit level training and education programs you're designing to make sure that whatever material you're giving to your service members truly can have immediate impact on their functioning. If you find that it doesn't, it might be an indication that that course or training should be delayed till later on in that individual's career, or that that training and education program simply has little educational value. And we could get much better investments of our time if we engaged into much higher quality adult education theory instead of these box-formatted military courses. Finally, adults are problem-centered. So at the beginning of every class, we should really present the problem that we're trying to solve. As we move through the course material should provide information to the student on how to solve this problem. Having a problem orientation helps maintain student motivation throughout the class. So now, how can we integrate the superior training model inside our education and training programs? Well, first and foremost, we always should begin our courses with whatever problem that this course material can solve for the individual service member. We need to allow for service members to engage with one another and the instructor to share experiences that might be relevant to the class. We need to have some type of activity for these service members to engage in so that they can actively practice what they're learning. The education and training materials that we present to our service members should directly relate to the common tasks that they perform. Finally, we need to allow for student direction inside the classroom. This might be as simple as allowing students a choice of options to pick, whether it's proving their mastery by writing an essay, taking an exam, or engaging in some type of practical exercise. Now, while this lecture isn't specifically about Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy, I'll take a moment to mention it here. Our students will arrive in our classrooms at different levels of mastery of the material. It's our job as an instructor to increase the capability of our students as much as possible. So while some students will come in as a blank slate, and it's our job to teach them just how to recognize and identify theories, the more experienced the student is, or the higher the learning that that student acquires, the more demands it will place on us as educators to increase the level of which the student can perform. Eventually, we want to move all our service members from recognizing and being able to apply theories to being able to critically examine whether or not that the material that we're giving is the correct way of solving the problems that they have. We want our service members to be creative and eventually be able to analyze whatever material they're given in full detail to either accept or reject the theories that we're presenting and build superior models by combining different concepts and ideas so we can maintain our dominance on the battlefield. So how do we incorporate andragogy and truly improve the quality of education and training for our service members? If possible, try to begin with taking a survey of your service members about what level of mastery they are about the topic that the course is intended to cover. What do they already know, and what do they expect to learn if they attend another class? This will give you some idea of where to target your activities, your models, and where the instruction is truly needed. Take in consideration the rank and duty assignments of the students attending your course. This will give you a better indication of how to design your practical exercises. One of the big problems I've seen in my own career, especially surrounding IT programs, is we don't make appropriate learning materials for the various different ranks and duty assignments. For example, I've seen strategic leaders attend courses on how to use a computer program, and they're really presented the information about how to do data level entry. However, these are strategic leaders and need to be able to do quality control or to enable the whole system to function on an enterprise level. So always consider what your students are going to be doing with this knowledge and to design the practical exercises specifically to how they're going to use this data in their own careers. If possible, provide some type of focused reading or other type of educational material such as a video prior to the students attending the course. This will give them some indication of what type of course materials they're trying to cover in the course, and it will actually prime the pump in terms of them reviewing the material. The more they have a chance of taking a look over materials before they arrive in a classroom, the more time they'll have for interacting with other students and engaging in peer learning. If a lecture or a presentation is needed, I advise you to keep it very brief and highly focused on the most critical aspects of what you're trying to teach. It's an error to think that we'll be able to teach everything inside a single class. It just simply doesn't happen, even within pedagogy. And attempting to teach too many things in a short time period will actually exceed the student's capability to learn that material. So focus on the most important problems and restrict the actual presentation to no more than 2/3 of the available time. You want to give your students time to engage with each other and the material to ask questions during the course, because it's often the case where the students in your classroom will have more experience than you'll have yourself. In this way, we want to take advantage of the education that exists inside the classroom and share that knowledge between each other. As I said earlier, we want to engage peer learning inside our classroom. It's highly possible that the instructor of the course is not as well educated on the material as the students themselves. And we want the students to share their experiences interacting in this field with each other to increase the knowledge of the entire classroom. There are some rather simple ways to encourage peer learning inside the classroom. The easiest way to do this is through discussion, allowing questions and answers throughout the class and asking the class itself to provide answers to any questions before the instructor attempts to answer it themselves. Large group discussions is probably the easiest method to engage the class and have an open discussion. However, there are some warnings that I need to apply here, is sometimes you lose total engagement of the class using this method. Small group discussions is also a highly effective technique. I suggest limiting the size of the groups to no more than 5 individuals to help keep their focus. If you have access to assistant instructors to keep them on track, it's also helpful. Having groups work together on problems is also a great way to encourage peer learning. And there's a couple methods that you can use here to advance the education in terms of using group projects. Now, depending on how varied your classroom is, if you have a wide scope of students, you may consider breaking down your students by rank or duty assignment. This will allow the individual groups to focus on their material specific to their rank or their duty assignment. For example, you could have all the field grade officers working on a problem associated with the material at the field grade level, all the company grade officers working together on a problem set that would be encountered by a company officer, etc., down the line. Another technique is to mix the levels of experience in each group. In this way, the most experienced students in your class will become essentially assistant instructors inside their small group problems. We should also focus on improving the utility of the classroom exercises. And I'm going to give you an example from my own experience. In the National Guard, every state has a deputy state surgeon. And that deputy state surgeon is responsible for creating a budget for the medical readiness activities for that state. In the traditional method of training DSSs, they would attend a course, they would receive a very long lecture about the various different concepts or factors that the instructor felt that someone should take account for, and that they would have a short period of question and answers at the end. It's not a very effective way to teach this method. A more effective means might be to provide a generic example of a state, assign it to every student that is attending, and have them, before the class begins, work on building a budget. This will have them begin to take a look at the material. They'll have an attempt to play with the material. When they arrive inside the classroom, a brief presentation can be given about what the factors or most critical factors for planning are by the instructor. They can be broken down into groups. The groups can then try to improve the models that they built and then discuss other factors that maybe the instructor didn't bring up. This would be an effective model of presenting this information to the classroom. But an even more effective way is, since we understand where the students are coming from, we have historical data from the state, is for the instructor to provide the actual historical data of that unit's performance to the individual coming to class, have them work on a budget specific to their state. When they arrive at the course room, they can be given a lecture by the instructor to tell them what the most critical factors the instructor believes. Then they can work in small groups to further work on their models to improve their budgetary designs. Working together, they will be able to see the variance in the historical data between the groups, and they might be able to identify further factors that the instructor didn't give them that are critical for budget planning. And at the end of the day, they'd be able to walk out of the course having completed their annual requirement to complete their budget. It should go without saying that this would provide the optimal model for education for this task, as the student would begin the process of doing the actual mission requirement. Before the class, they would receive instruction and further their ideas or concepts of how to complete their tasks, and then be able to work with peers to further improve and refine their actual final project, which is the budget requirement for the year. Now, as I talk about the various methods to increase classroom learning, I hope you noticed that there was an increased burden on the actual instructor to prepare for the classroom. Using a generic approach to every student is very simple and very easy to construct. Having tailored questions for each member that are attending this class would be a lot more burdensome in terms of the time requirement for the instructor. However, we get a lot higher return on investment when it comes to learning that's been achieved inside the classroom. The important point to take away here is if you want to design high-quality education experiences for your service members, you need to ensure that you have time to invest in the preparation for these courses. We also need to be aware of how our environment impacts learning. If we want to encourage peer learning, a traditional auditorium-style classroom may not be optimal. We may prefer something like small round table setups for our classroom to encourage discussion between students. However, if you find yourself in need of giving large blocks of instruction or lecture, a round table classroom setup may not be optimal, as some students may find themselves with their backs towards the instructor or presentation screen. We can resolve this by having multiple different presentation screens in the classroom, or we may do things like have an auditorium where we seat our students for the bulk lecture, and then we move them into small group environments so they can engage in peer learning as they move towards their practical activities. We also want to have additional material on whatever we're instructing available to students as they leave the classroom. This is especially important if we want to encourage self-directed learning. We want to ensure that the service members that are interested about learning more about the topic at hand have some type of resource to go to further their education. Course evaluations are a critical part of andragogy. First, we need to determine what learning occurred inside the classroom and whether or not our service members reached the level of mastery that we had intended by our courses. If they failed to reach that, we need to design further education and training opportunities to raise the mastery level of our service members. Asking students for ideas about what practical exercises they wish they engaged in or what topics they needed further education on is a great way of generating ideas on how to improve the course for the future. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I truly believe that andragogy would be a way of increasing the quality of education and training programs that we offer our service members. I believe if we use this method more often, we could eliminate the low quality education models that we currently have and increase the overall motivation in our service members to go out there and continue to learn. I believe this learning method is more appropriate for the ultimate goal of exercising mission command on the battlefield and having independent thinkers inside our service. I also hope the further use of andragogy inside military instruction will further the concept of self-directed learning and have individual service members take a more active role about what they're learning throughout their day. If any of you have a means of further advancing andragogy inside the classroom, I encourage you to leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and I invite you to subscribe to the Evolving Warfighter for more videos on the topic of military history and military self-development. Until next time, focus on your self-development so we can dominate the modern battlefield.